Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome back to Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry, and we're going to continue with the questions we have between mandatory minicamp and training camp. No news has broken since the last episode, where we just learned that Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals would start negotiating again. And Adam Schefter did go on the Pat McAfee show and say, it sounds like the Bengals only want a one-year deal. This is not news to us here. I don't think, right? I think everyone understands, if you follow on Twitter or through the show here, the Bengals have only offered one-year deals so far. Is all the reporting we've gotten, all the hints, all the rumors, everything is said the whole time that the Bengals have tried to get a one-year deal done with Trey Hendrickson. So no surprise. So hopefully they move on that. That seems like the biggest hurdle out of anything. If anything, we've heard their price has gone up. They've offered more each time, but they just want it to be a one-year deal. I disagree with them on that, obviously. And that's not in any of the questions that I selected from today's episode for today's episode. And they were submitted through Twitter at Joe Goodberry. If you're not following, if you're not using the app anymore, or whatever it may be, then that's where I pulled them from, even though there was some YouTube comments. And we should get to a live show eventually so you guys can ask any questions you want. But I've got a bunch of questions lined up here today. And then I'm going to end it with, I finally figure out what to do with the offseason project, right? Typically in the summer months before camp gets here, since I've been with First Star, I've done a project, whether it was the book we did, which I've got behind here, that had scouting reports on every single player with projections and all that. You know, everyone on the 80-man roster, 90-man roster. Wow. Anyway, that was 2 years ago. And last year was the top 100 Bengals of all time, which was a great series. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do over the next 4 weeks or so as we gear up for training camp. And that'll be at the end of the episode. So stay tuned to that. Jump right into questions. The first one here from Burrow Time. Let Joe cook as he's going by now. He wants to know, hey, if let's say the next generation of Bengals ownership is handing the keys to me as president of football operations, what changes would I make? What would get them to where they need to be? And he asks at the end there, would I keep Zack and Duke? I would probably handle it. Well, first, I'm flattered by the question. Not that this will ever happen, but I do like to pretend. Aren't we all here pretending anyways? But I would probably be the type that would say, okay, give me some time to figure this out. Give me some time to figure out what you're lacking. From the outside, our perspective may be made completely different, right? Now, what we think is happening, what we hear is happening, the rumors, whatever it may be. It may not be true. It may not be exactly how it's happening behind closed doors or within that building. So I would not just walk in and say Zach's fired, Duke's fired. That's not how I would handle it. I would try to learn as much as I can, understand as much as I can, and see where their flaws in the process is. Plus, you know, you'd want to be sure of what you're doing. There's good people in the building, of course. They're not completely devoid of being competitive over the last, how long since Duke Tobin's been there? I mean, for most of the last 25 years, it's been a competitive program. But what would get them over the hump? Clear things, right? Like maximizing windows, maximizing cap space, maximizing pushing some of these bigger hits in the future years, and understanding how to control the value now versus what it will look like later. Signing guys early in order to control that value. Making those dead cap hits not something you're worried about. Every team has them. But what I wanted to say is, and I almost got a sidetrack there, was making those cap hits as small as possible now so that it's less of a cap in the future. And we've done the math on this. I've tried to show it. I struggled to explain exactly what I'm talking about here. This is not my area of expertise. I would hire someone for that. What I mean is, if you have $20 million in rollover on a $200 million cap, what is that worth? That you get that 20 million next year, but now the cap's 230 million. That 20 million is now worth less, right? All the salaries have gone up. Now it's a smaller portion of the overall cap. You're losing value. So things like that, right? There's the margins that I feel like the Bengals, even if I had constraints because it's not a big market, because maybe the ownership doesn't have a lot of money or doesn't want to spend as much money as some of these other franchises, I still think there are ways you can build this team and build this franchise. I would scouting and drafting would be the fundamental part in how we build this roster and how we build this team. I would put all the resources in that, all the resources in the advanced data and analytics to try and gain an edge anywhere you possibly can. Because again, you're trying to do it with less resources. I would assume you're not just going to be dumped with all the resources you can possibly imagine, like you're the LA Rams or something, or whoever's got money. Name a team that's got a ton of money. The Denver Broncos, right? The Washington Commanders. I assume you're not just going to get that overnight. So we're looking at scouting. We're looking at data. And then from there, how can we manage the cap? How can we save as much money by spending more money, if that makes sense? Again, like I said, less rollover money, more crunching these contracts, extending guys early, taking those risks, and going from there. And then when it comes to Duke and Zach, you figure it out as you go. Maybe those changes would help Zach look better. Maybe those changes would help Duke look better. Duke's not the one doing the contracts, right? If you think Duke wanted Jesse Bates to walk away, one of his best draft picks, of course not. You don't think that impacts Zach now as his defense starts to deteriorate? So I think it all matters. And those would just be some of the things I would start with and go from there, obviously. They seem like simple things. Pushing cash over cap, spending more, going with data, going with a bigger scouting program. I don't see how those are bad things. But that's what I would do. That's how it started. Next question. From Dewey, what is a realistic and reasonable expectation for starters to play in preseason? He says he's still nervous about the idea that they're going to play more. And I agree. I think we can go a little too far with killing the Bengals for their slow starts. Has that affected them? No doubt about it. Are they better in December than they are in September? No doubt about it. Are those things you want? I want them to be better at the end of the season. I want them to be better in December and January. Marvin Lewis's teams were never ready at the end. Or I should say, never able to hold it together through the stretch of the long season, through into January. Having said that, there's got to be a happy medium of starting off better and finishing hot. And when we say they got to start better, nobody disagrees. But I think when we jump to immediately saying they got to play more in preseason, I don't know that that's correct. I think it could help. I think preseason is helpful, but I also think it's bland. There's nothing going on. The defense isn't showing you anything. They're not hitting, not to the extent that a regular season is. And if anything, you may expose these guys to injury more often. I think that's what Dewey's nervous about, and I agree with him. But just because things are so bland, like how's that going to help you fire on all cylinders when you get to September? How does playing in this preseason, maybe the blocking's better? Maybe the O-line's better because they actually get more time to gel. I think there are benefits, but I also got to walk that line of I don't want anyone to get hurt because I'm playing meaningless preseason games. We've seen guys like Joseph Osai get hurt in preseason games because the Bengals are still playing them in that final week. And that has impacted their ability to rush the passer until he was healthy again. I don't even want that. I don't even like preseason at all. I would take one preseason game and then move on with our lives and go right to regular season if it was up to me. So what's reasonable? You look around the league, I do watch a lot of preseason games because I love the draft so much that I like to see these guys play. So I actually, from an evaluation perspective, really like preseason. And I like watching these other teams. Weirdly, right? That's kind of weird. Let me know if you do the same. I think it helps with fantasy football. Also, you see these guys playing, you're like, they're going to turn to that receiver. And when he does, this guy's going to be good. A lot of fantasy pickups, waiver pickups were because of free agency or because of preseason for me personally. So what's reasonable watching these other teams? Most teams will play their starters in 2 games, whether that's a 1 drive or 2 drives. It's usually dependent on how that goes. If it's a long, successful 10-play drive, we're done. We don't need to see anymore. If you go 3 and out, we're going to see you one more time. And then there's usually one more long extended look in the second preseason game, whether that's all the way up to half, whether that's 2-3 drives, or a long drive into the second quarter. Some teams even bring them back out in the third quarter, which I think at that point is a little much. So what we've seen from the Bengals is a drive here or there lately. Last year was just one drive versus the Bucks. Am I thinking 2 years ago? What was that against the Packers? Man, trying to remember preseason games. Anyways, what we may see now is maybe that one drive from the first game, maybe an extended look in the second game, and then nothing in that third game for the starters, which I think makes a ton of sense. Remember, you get that week in between too that we didn't get before. So I'm with you, Dewey. I'm a little bit nervous about it as well. I don't know that everyone feels that way. To me, always thought exhibition games were pointless for getting yourself ready. I think you can get ready in a controlled atmosphere at practice, at camp, even at joint practices. So I was in agreement, and maybe I'm wrong completely. I'm wrong about a lot of things, but I was in agreement with the thought process that Zach Taylor had of control the atmosphere, get quality practice in, even against the Rams or whatever it was, against the Colts. No, it wasn't the Colts. It was the joint practice. The Bears. I was there during the Packers joint practice. That turned into a fight. So did the Rams game. So did the Rams practice turn into a fight. So maybe it's not controlled. Maybe that's part of the issue. To me, the slow starts are largely because Burrow hasn't been healthy. If Burrow is healthy and firing and playing well in September, Burrow's numbers in September are not great. If he's good in September, you're going to win a lot of games. And then we're not talking about preseason. Next question. From William Jacob. The Bengals haven't shown the ability to have sustained success once they've paid their quarterback. He brings up a great point, honestly. I'm paraphrasing here. Once they paid the quarterback after the rookie contract, and doesn't look so great with the Burrow era now, what gives me the confidence that they've got it right this time? Well, William, I got to tell you, I don't have that confidence. I don't know if I've expressed that, and maybe give you the wrong idea, but I don't. I'm with you. I've said this before. When they paid Andy Dalton, AJ Green, and Clint Bowling all from the 2011 draft class all together, they made the playoffs in 2015, and that was it. That was it. And Andy wasn't healthy then. It's the last time we saw them together, and they all got paid between 2014 and 15. Like, they didn't know how to build after that. They didn't know how to draft. The drafting changed in 2014, 2015. Those are 2 of their worst classes back to back. That will sink you right away. And I have to look at the Bengals drafting recently and say, they're doing it again. They don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand how to build a team once you have limited resources. Once that quarterback takes so much more of that cap space, so much more of the pie has to go to him, you cannot mess around. Your drafting has to be pristine. It is paramount to your success. And they keep doing what they did in the last generations. I mean, they did it with Carson Palmer too. A little bit different though, because the reason they did do this, they did fail with Palmer, but in a different way. Because the CBA then, the collective bargaining agreement, then there was no rookie wage scale. Palmer came in making a lot of money, right as a rookie. And they had a pretty good team. But then once they paid him, when did they pay him? Right before that playoff game, right? In 2005, they gave him that extension. They didn't make the playoffs again for 4 more years. So when they pay these guys, you gotta be sure of what you're doing. That 2009. So let's think about this real fast. 2005 team of Chad, TJ, Rudy Johnson, Carson Palmer, right? In the offensive line. That was fantastic. Once they paid all those guys, they did not make the playoffs again with them. It wasn't until 2009 they go back. Cedric Benson's the running back then. The offensive line's completely different. You still have Chad. You don't have TJ Hushmanzada then. So you still had Chad and Carson Palmer. That was it. And that was 4 years later. That team is completely different. The 2011 team, 2015, I spoke about that. Once they paid those three guys from that draft, they didn't make the playoffs again. Ended up, really 2018 was the last time. Yeah, because 2019 was Zach Taylor. So 2018, they started off well that year, and then, it just imploded. The team wasn't good enough anymore. The roster wasn't good enough. They kept hemorrhaging talent and weren't able to replace it. And then now we go back to the last few years of drafting in the Joe Burrow era, and it's not great. You're not getting immediate impact. You're not getting guys that are turning into superstars. The draft season brings so much hope from a fan base because if they nail it, if they got lucky, we're in good shape. But the Bengals have been drafting very weirdly lately. So I don't have that confidence. And I agree. And it's a fair point to bring up William Jacob William Jacob, I think. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me anymore. It's a fair point. And it's what haunts us at night. This is not supposed to be a negative episode. Next question. From Slim Chandler. I know the Bengals have fewer scouts than most and that they're area scouts, but do they focus on every position within that area? It seems like the better process would be to have scouts that focus on positions. And I agree. It's why I picked this question to bring up. I think this is a huge thing that I don't know how common this is around the league or not. I know for my process when I do the draft, and I'll touch on what the Bengals do as well. But when I do the draft, I try to focus on one position at a time, whether it's running backs. I want to watch as many running backs as I can before I move on to wide receiver. And the reason I do that is because I'm directly comparing them to each other, directly comparing their skills to each other. And I will I'll watch a few NFL running backs, as much film as I can, highlights, whatever, get my calibration set. And then I'll watch draft prospects of that position. And I'll stick with that position for 2 or 3 weeks until I'm done with it. And then I move on to the next. So Chandler, I agree. If the Bengals have area scouts, and most teams do, they'll have a northeast scout, a southeast scout, a west scout, Pacific, whatever, right? That's how scouting works. And you go to those schools and you meet and you talk and you share information and you scout those players from those teams. You have to know every position. And that's good because it's good for why area scouts are good. Because it's good for building connections. It's good for getting to know the layout. Those programs, you start to really understand what they're looking for, what they're recruiting, where their strengths and weaknesses are in that area, and what kind of guys they're bringing in physically, character-wise, all that. You build those relationships, you get all the information, hopefully as correct as possible. But I agree with your premise that you're bringing up that it might be better if you had scouts that focused on positions. Would you rather have an expert at quarterback evaluating all your quarterbacks or having him evaluate offensive line and corners and safeties and all these other things? I would rather have guys focus on positions specifically. So maybe this goes into the first question we had. What are things we would change or I would change? That might be one. I want guys that are focusing on positions. Now you bring up the coaches. Is that what the coaches do? And that probably is where the coaches help navigate this thing for the personnel department, where they will focus on their guys that they, in the draft. If it's a running backs coach, again, sticking with that, he's going to focus on the running backs. But then he's not a scout either. This brings up another point. When people say like, oh, this guy played in the NFL, take his word for it over whoever, name your favorite draft analyst or whatever. Yeah, but is he an evaluator? I know he played, but does that make him an evaluator? Has he been evaluating for 10 years and can compare these prospects to guys that failed or succeeded? Does he use data? Does he understand the data? Does he understand the draft process? Does he understand scouting? Like, if that's not his area, just because he played football at a high level doesn't mean he's better at it. So again, you may have this running back coach evaluating running backs, but is he better at that than a guy who scouts running backs and has a catalog of this stuff and is an expert in it? And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about a scout that if this was his job, uh, I'd lean toward. I mean, that's his job to do that. The coach would be valuable. Don't get me wrong, but if you could get them to focus on a singular position, I agree. I think that's something that I would like to see or hear NFL teams do, because I think there's advantages in that for sure. And that's how you probably would find the gems. That's how you get to the end of the draft and you're plucking these guys off the undrafted circuit and getting some gems that the Bengals have struggled to find. So maybe that's another area where that could be better off for you. Next question. From the K-Man, he brings up a theory here that the Ravens won't win the division. The Bengals will, because no AFC North team has ever won the division 3 years in a row. Think about that. You want to talk about parity, the strongest division in the NFL. This is a strong case for it. This is a strong stat to support that case, because no team has won it 3 years in a row. That is weird, right? And we're only talking about 3 teams: the Bengals, the Steelers, the Ravens, because the Browns have never won the AFC North, which is crazy to even think about. They haven't won the division since like 91 or 92, whatever it is. I remember looking at this chart recently when it popped up. And I was like, that's a lot of parity. Wait, I thought there's 4 teams in the division. I think the Jags and the Titans, one of the two, have won the division, the Central, when it was the AFC Central, more recently than the Cleveland Browns have. But this isn't a Cleveland Browns bash fest. We can do that anytime. That's who we play week 1. So it's Browns hate week for the next, what do we got? Does anyone have a countdown for week 1? We've got like 10 weeks. Browns hate week for every week until then. I like it, K-Man. If that's how it plays out again, and let's not let the Ravens be the first team to do 3 years in a row. Let's swing that back to the Bengals. But AFC North fashion, it'll be the Steelers. Yuck. Next question. From D. Saucy, which Bengals player would be best at an Olympic event outside of flag football? Well, you know what? I think we should talk about the flag football thing a little bit. So I know you tried to exclude it, but you could look at any of the track guys, I think, like Andre Yosivash, and I'm going to stay with that because Yoshi, to me, would be a great candidate for the flag football league as well. Because I don't mean league, I mean the Olympics. I don't know that you're sending stars to that. If each team's going to have one representative, I don't know that you send Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? Do you want them to get hurt? Do you even need to send one of those guys? You should be able to win this without that, right? Maybe we send the Andre Yosivash. So here's my thought process. Number one, every team's going to want to send their quarterback. If Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen are the 4 quarterbacks to go on a flag football team, you want Joe Burrow sitting the bench or whatever's going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying that he's worse than those guys. I'm just saying, like, it'd be stupid. Jamar Chase. Do we want to send Jamar Chase for flag football? There are so many receivers that would dominate that you don't need to send Jamar Chase. Now, if each team's got to think about, like, all right, who would be a perfect representative? Number one, I want to think of it this way. I want someone marketable. I want someone that, and I think the players would, and the Players Association would like this as well. Give me someone that has a great face that people would like, great personality, that is an athlete that could sell your team and sell the sport. To me, Yoshi would be great for that, right? The girls love him. He's got a great personality, does Ivy League brains with track athleticism, with height, weight, speed. That seems perfect to me. He would play in the flag football league, probably dominate, become a bigger star. And this is why this is like my case for him for like, why would you want to do it, Yoshi? Here's why. Because you could dominate there. Your stardom would only grow. Because we don't know if Yoshi's ever going to be like a number 1 or number 2 in the NFL, right? We don't think he will be. So even if when we get to free agency, like what kind of deal is he looking at from other teams or from the Bengals? This is how you grow even more and make yourself marketable. And I think he would be perfect for that. So would he be able to compete? I don't know if any of our of the Bengals players would be good at like a track and field thing. Like, would Yoshi actually be as good as Olympic athlete in sprinting? Probably not. Would DJ Turner, probably the fastest guy on the roster, be faster than the fastest Olympians? No. Right. So it's just different. So it's hard to say unless someone's got some hidden talent that we don't know about. And that'd be a good question for when Olympics come up. Maybe maybe these guys, maybe we've got some Olympic rowers or something. I don't know. But Yoshi for flag football to me would be the guy I pick because I think he would do well with that. And plus, he's got a great marketable face, name, personality. So, yeah, that's who I would nominate. Next question. And the last question from Flyer Fanatic. How many snaps in the regular season has Shamar Stewart jeopardized by not participating so far? Or is it more about the quality of his snaps that he will get? Good question. I think it could affect both, clearly, right? Like number one, the quality. The development part of not having the rookie camp, the mandatory mini camp, and then maybe not training camp. We got to see. He said he's going to hold out if they don't have a deal done by then. So that would affect his ability to hit the ground running, right? I think he was in chance. There was a chance he was starting. They just lost Sam Hubbard. You need those rundown snaps at left defensive end, and he had a clear cut path to starting there, and maybe he still does. There is time for him to recoup that. Not fully. You can never get those reps back again, but there's a lot of guys that have been hurt and aren't getting those reps, and will still have great rookie seasons. So we know Shamar needed those reps in terms of film evaluation. How many snaps has he potentially lost? Well, let's say he shows up first day of minicamp or training camp. I'm sorry. I don't think it's that much. What is he in line for? Usually about 22 to 2,300 snaps for your entire defensive end room. If we're saying Trey Hendrickson's here and he's going to start week 1, he's in line for 750 snaps. You've got another 400 for Miles Murphy, 450 to 500 for Joseph Osai. We're in the 16 to 1,700 range. I think Cam Sample can play, and he might play another 300. He may be the guy beating out Shamar Stewart. He may be the guy starting in Sam Hubbard's spot because Stewart's not there. Maybe that's really where the competition is. And hey, you want to get your snaps back, beat out a guy that's the consummate pro, right? And Cam Sample, who is an underrated player on this defense. And I think they missed him last year. So if he's another 300 snaps, that's probably 200 of Shamar Stewart's snaps. I think there was the potential for Stewart to play 500 snaps as a rookie. And if we cut 200 of those and he gets 300 and he's more of a Miles Murphy role that Murphy has been the last 2 years. Murphy dealt with injuries also last year that probably cut in the snaps a little bit. But like rookie year Miles Murphy, yeah, I can see that. And that's not great. That's not what you want. If we get 350 snaps from your first round pick and the only real big addition you made to the defense, no disrespect to TJ Slayton. We got a TJ Slayton episode coming up eventually here. Who's a good rundown defender. I mean, TJ Slayton is a true nose tackle. Should help this defense get where we need to be and get back there. But we're talking like high-end impact potentially. Shamar Stewart's the guy they added on defense. And we're saying we're only get 350 snaps out of him. That's why I think they'll still shoehorn him in and give us 500 snaps. But potentially, if you're asking potentially, how much did he lose? Maybe 200 snaps, and it may have gone to Cam Sample. I could see that happening. But I think this question doesn't just rely on how good Stewart and when Stewart shows up. It also is questioning how good Joseph Osai and Miles Murphy are, and can they take a step? How healthy Cam Sample is, and Cedric Johnson. We can't leave him out. If he is good or takes a step in his development, he deserves some playing time. So the Bengals are potentially deep at defensive end without having a true stud or star opposite of Trey Hendrickson. So it'll be interesting how they navigate that. And can those guys Voltron together to make one good defensive end opposite of Hendrickson? Maybe. And I think that's what the Bengals are hoping on with having all of them. That's the last question. And so now I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do for the next month or so before training camp starts. It is 2025. 25 years of Bengals football in the 2000s. And I'm going to go through a depth chart. Okay, so we're going to make a 53-man roster based on the guys that have played for the Bengals over the last 25 years with a catch. They had to have appeared and played in 25 games. So we're doing 25 years, 25 games is the minimum threshold, and we're going to do a full depth chart. And so I've already laid it out, and I started with like 80 players. And there was a couple of guys I had to cut to get down to this roster. So each episode, we're going to go over a few positions. We're going to try and string this out to be, 3 weeks or so. So 6 episodes is what I'm thinking. May go a little bit further. We'll see how fast I can do it. I'm going to have some highlights in there, talk about some stats, what decisions I made. These are all players that I have watched, and I will go over this again when I start the first episode of it. Of course, they're players I've watched. When I did the top greatest Bengals of all time, the 100 greatest Bengals of all time list, there was a ton of players I've never watched before. They were just before my time, right? It happens. But these guys since 2000s are the guys I grew up with, watched at a professional level as well, and now can say, hey, I think this guy is better than this guy. And I think that's how I'm going to do the depth chart. That's how I'm going to do the roster. It's not just on this guy rushed for 6,000 yards and this guy rushed for 4,000 yards, so he's going to start over him. No, it's not about that. It's player evaluation. Who was better? Who would be better in this role? Who would be better together? Who could complement each other? Who would be best with this guy opposite of this and all that? And I think it's a good time. I did the depth chart today, worked it out, and was like, yeah, there's a lot of content here. Some of these positions are so dang good. It makes you proud to be a Bengals fan, actually. They were really good over the last 25 years at certain positions, and it's fun to reminisce and go over. Until next time on Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. Hooday.
Bengals fans, tired of the same old post-game chatter? Want real insight beyond the scoreboard? Then you need Bengals on the Brain with Joe Goodberry, presented by First Star Logistics. Joe Goodberry isn't just a fan, he's a die-hard Bengals football analyst. Every week, Joe dives deep into the Bengals game film, breaking down the plays that mattered, revealing hidden strategies, and uncovering the true impact of individual performances. Get ready for post-game analysis like you've never heard before, player evaluations that go beyond the stats, and the most in-depth Bengals draft coverage on the internet. Don't just watch the Bengals, understand the Bengals. Subscribe to Bengals on the Brain with Joe Goodberry on the First Star Media Group's YouTube channel. Get smart, get obsessed, get Bengals on the Brain.